I'm 19, and for most of my life, this house, my house, was the only place that ever felt like home. But lately, it hasn't felt that way at all. My mom married Eric when I was 16. At first, I tried to give him a chance. He wasn't awful, not then. He smiled, asked polite questions, even brought me a few birthday gifts those first months. But there was always something in his eyes when Mom wasn't looking. Something cold. Something calculating. Like he was just measuring me. At first, it was small things. Passive-aggressive comments, like how I never helped enough around the house, or how I should be more of a man already. He'd roll his eyes if I played music too loud or if I wore something he didn't like. I brushed it off. I figured, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I just didn't want to share my mom with someone new. But it didn't stop there. It got worse. Much worse. When Mom wasn't around, Eric turned into a different person. He'd nitpick everything I did, how I folded the laundry, how I swept the floor, even how I breathed, it seemed. He'd say things like, if this were my kid, I'd have taught him some discipline, or maybe if you weren't so lazy, your mom wouldn't have to work so hard. I tried telling her, I really did. But she just gave me that tired look, said I was imagining things, that Eric was just trying to help, that maybe he was just a little old-fashioned. I stopped bringing it up. Then about 6 months ago, everything changed. My mom got pregnant. And that baby? That was all Eric talked about. Suddenly, he was Father of the Year planning nursery colors, researching cribs, even reading books on parenting. And meanwhile, I faded into the background. I became invisible. Worse than invisible. I became a problem. That's when the lies started. Eric began twisting things, telling my mom I was being disrespectful, that I was staying out late, which I wasn't, or that I was rude and ungrateful. And Mom believed him. Or at least, she didn't challenge him. The home I'd grown up in suddenly didn't feel like mine anymore. Every corner of the house felt hostile, like I was intruding in a place I'd lived my entire life. I started staying in my room more, talking less, walking on eggshells. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. 2 days ago, Mom sat me down at the kitchen table. She looked nervous. She couldn't even meet my eyes. I knew something was wrong before she opened her mouth. She said, "Honey, you're 19 now. You're growing up. And with the baby coming, we think it's time you start thinking about getting your own place." At first, I thought I misheard her. I asked her what I did wrong. She said it wasn't like that. It wasn't about something I did, but about the space they needed for the new baby. That it would be good for me to gain some independence. But I could see Eric standing behind her, arms crossed, smirking. I knew this wasn't her idea. He was pulling the strings. And then he said it cool as ice. "You've got 2 days to find somewhere else. We need to get started on remodeling, and we can't have you underfoot." 2 days. 2 days. My whole life flipped upside down in an instant. No warning. No plan. Just 2 days to pack up my entire existence and vanish. And I had no idea what to do. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the baby monitor Eric had already set up, even though the baby wasn't due for months. It was like he was preparing the house to erase me, replace me. The more I thought about it, the more real it became. They really wanted me gone. The next morning, I went to work at the grocery store, trying to pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't concentrate. I messed up 3 orders, dropped a crate of eggs, and almost rang someone up twice. My manager pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I just muttered, "Family stuff," and forced a smile. But inside, I was falling apart. Everywhere I looked, it felt like doors were closing. I didn't have a savings account, just a couple $100 in checking, enough for groceries and gas. I was in community college, taking night classes, scraping by with a part-time job and whatever leftover change I could find between couch cushions. Rent in this city is a joke. Even the crummiest studio apartments want first month's rent, last month, a security deposit, and a credit check. I had none of it. My best friend offered me his couch for a night or two, but he still lived with his parents. It wouldn't last. And honestly, I was too ashamed to take him up on it. I thought about calling my real dad. But the truth is, I barely know the guy. He left when I was 5 and never looked back. I haven't heard from him in years. Reaching out now would feel like begging, and I didn't even know where to start. I checked some online roommate ads, but most of them wanted people over 21 with full-time jobs. A few of them looked sketchy. Like, really sketchy. I couldn't risk getting stuck in some nightmare situation just because I was desperate. I tried reasoning with my mom one more time that night. I waited until Eric had gone to bed and sat next to her on the couch. I told her I wasn't ready, that I didn't have the money, that I was scared. She reached for my hand, and for a second, I thought maybe I was getting through to her. But then she just said, "I'm sorry. I really am. But this is how it has to be now." And that was it. I went back to my room and sat in the dark for hours. My phone battery died. I didn't care. All I could think was, how did I become so disposable? I kept replaying everything Eric ever said to me. The way he looked at me, like I was some nuisance he couldn't wait to scrape off his shoe. Maybe this was his plan all along. Move in, play nice, wait until mom was pregnant, then push me out. And the worst part? He succeeded. I didn't feel like a person anymore. I felt like a burden being removed from the equation. So I sat there, with 24 hours left, staring at the place that used to be my home. And I had no idea where I was going to go. By the time the next morning rolled around, I felt hollow. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, and hadn't answered any texts. Not that I got many. I was too embarrassed to tell anyone what was happening. My mom barely looked me in the eye when I walked into the kitchen. She just placed a bowl of cereal on the table like it was any other day. Eric, of course, had plenty to say. "So," he said, sipping coffee with that smug smirk he wore like armor. "You got your stuff packed? Someone's coming tomorrow to look at the back room. We're thinking of converting it into a nursery." He didn't even wait for my answer. It was like I didn't exist. Just a logistical problem to be solved and cleared out before the paint can showed up. I nodded quietly, pretending to eat while my stomach churned. I went back to my room and stared at my half-filled duffel bag. I had nowhere to go, no clue what to do. My fingers hovered over my phone screen before I finally tapped open my contacts. There was one name I hadn't considered until now. Aunt Marilyn. Technically, she was my grandmother's younger sister, but I always called her Aunt. When I was younger, she used to send me birthday cards with $20 bills and signed every letter with "Love you like my own." We hadn't spoken much since my grandma passed, but I remembered how kind she was, how she always made me feel seen. I didn't even hesitate. I called. When she picked up, I broke down. I told her everything. How my stepdad wanted me out, how my mom was going along with it, how I had no money, no plan, and less than 24 hours before I was effectively homeless. She was quiet at first. Then she said, "Sweetheart, don't move a muscle. I'm coming there first thing tomorrow, and we're going to fix this." I tried to tell her she didn't need to do that. She lived hours away, but she wasn't hearing it. "You just stay calm," she said, "and don't say a word to that man. I promised your grandma I'd look after you if anything ever happened." Well, this counts. I hung up and just sat there, stunned. For the first time in days, I felt something other than panic. I felt hope. That night, Eric knocked on my door again. "Clock's ticking," he said. "I'll need your key back tomorrow. You've had time. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't say a word. I just looked him in the eye for the first time and shut the door in his face. I stayed up most of the night packing the rest of my things, not knowing what the next day would bring, but praying that Aunt Marilyn could really help. And then came the knock. Right on time, 2 p.m. sharp. I was in my room, zipping up my bag, when I heard the door open. Eric's voice, "Can I help you?" And then hers, louder than I'd ever heard it. "Yes, you can get everyone into the living room." Now, the moment I stepped into the hallway and saw her standing there, furious, confident, holding a manila envelope, I knew something big was about to happen. Eric tried to object, but she silenced him with one look. "I am family," she said sharply, "and I have something very important to say." She turned to me, smiled, then looked at my mom. Then she said the words that changed everything. "This house belongs to him. Your son, not you, not your husband. And he's not going anywhere." The room went absolutely still. My mom blinked like she'd just been slapped, and Eric scoffed in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" he barked. "That's ridiculous. This house belongs to your daughter, his mother. We've been living here for years." Aunt Marilyn didn't flinch. She calmly pulled a stack of papers from her envelope and spread them out on the coffee table like playing cards at a high-stakes poker match. "No," she said, locking eyes with him. "This house belonged to my sister, your mother-in-law, and before she passed, she made it clear she wanted it to stay in the family. Specifically, she wanted it to belong to someone she trusted. And that someone wasn't you." She turned to me, her voice softening. "Your grandma changed her will the month before she passed. She left this house entirely in your name, effective the day you turned 18. I stood frozen, trying to process what she was saying. Me? Owner of the house? That couldn't be right. Eric stepped forward, his voice rising. That's a lie. You're making this up. She didn't trust you either. She would have told us. She didn't tell anyone. Aunt Marilyn cut him off. Not even your wife. She knew you were manipulating her. She saw how you treated her grandson when no one was watching. And she made me promise, that I wouldn't say anything unless it became absolutely necessary. She gave him a long, deliberate look. And this? This is necessary. My mom looked like she'd been gut-punched. She sat down slowly, eyes wide, hands trembling. You're serious? She really did that. Aunt Marilyn nodded. I have the signed documents, notarized and witnessed. They're filed with the county, and there's a copy with her lawyer. Your son has been the legal owner of this house since his last birthday. My stepdad's mouth opened, then closed again. He looked completely thrown off balance. He started pacing like a caged animal, muttering about fraud and manipulation and how this wasn't fair. But I wasn't watching him. I was watching my mom. She looked so small, so conflicted, caught between the man she married and the son she just tried to throw out. I didn't know if she felt ashamed or betrayed or simply shocked. Maybe all three. And for the first time, I didn't care. Aunt Marilyn turned to me and gave a little nod, like it was my move now. My voice shook a bit, but I finally spoke. I'm not leaving, I said quietly but firmly. This is my house now. You don't get to push me out just because I don't fit into your perfect little plan. Eric stepped toward me, face red. You think you can just... I held up my hand and surprised even myself. No, you don't get to yell at me in my own house. If you don't like it, you can leave. He froze, like he'd been slapped. My mom whispered, please, let's all calm down. But I wasn't done. You lied about me. You manipulated her. You made me feel like I was nothing. Well, guess what? I'm not nothing. And I'm not going anywhere. The silence that followed felt like a thunderclap. Aunt Marilyn smiled softly, proud. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't helpless. I had something solid under my feet. I had a voice. And they finally had to hear it. Eric looked like he was about to explode. His jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. This is absurd, he growled. You're a child. What do you know about owning a house? You can't just take over like this. I didn't flinch. I stood my ground, heart pounding, but voice steady. I didn't take over anything. Grandma gave me this house because she saw what you were doing long before anyone else did. I didn't ask for it. But I'm not giving it up just because it's inconvenient for you. Eric's face turned a deeper shade of red. He turned to my mom, practically pleading. Tell him this isn't right. That this is your house too. My mom looked like she might crumble into pieces right there on the couch. Her hands twisted in her lap, her eyes darting between the man she married and the son she raised. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know she left it to him. Aunt Marilyn folded her arms. No, you didn't. Because she didn't trust you to protect him from this man. And unfortunately, she was right. Eric barked a humorless laugh. So what now? You're the big boss? You going to kick us both out and play king of the castle? I didn't answer right away. I took a breath, looked at my mom, and softened my tone. I don't want to kick anyone out. This isn't revenge. I just want a home where I'm not treated like a burden or a problem to get rid of. Then I turned back to Eric. But things are going to change. He crossed his arms and sneered. Or what? You'll call the cops? You'll evict us. No, I said. I'll do something worse. I'll set boundaries. I saw the flicker in his eyes. He didn't know what to do with someone who stood up to him. Especially not someone he'd written off as weak. I'll let you stay, I continued. But on my terms. 1. You stop talking down to me. You treat me like a human being, not an inconvenience. 2. Any major changes to the house, you run by me first. That includes remodeling anything. 3. We start family counseling. I'm not pretending this is normal anymore. He looked ready to argue, but Aunt Marilyn raised a hand. Before you open your mouth again, you should know, if you don't agree to those terms, I'll help him get a restraining order if he needs one. You don't want to test me on this. The silence after that felt final. Eric stared at me, a storm brewing in his eyes. But he knew he'd lost the upper hand. For once, he wasn't the one calling the shots. He didn't answer, just turned and walked out of the room, slamming the door behind him. My mom stayed behind, wiping her eyes. I didn't know, she kept whispering. I didn't know he was making you feel that way. I tried to tell you, I said quietly. So many times. She nodded slowly, her voice cracking. I'm sorry. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. Later that evening, Aunt Marilyn and I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and breathing for the first time in what felt like forever. "You handled yourself well," she said. "Your grandma would be proud." I smiled for the first time all day. "Thanks for coming." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone anymore." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The following days felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. The house hadn't changed physically, same creaky stairs, same leaky faucet in the kitchen, but something about it felt different. For the first time in years, I walked through those halls without the constant weight of being unwelcome. Eric avoided me almost completely. He'd shuffle into the kitchen for coffee, say nothing, then disappear into the garage. We barely exchanged more than a grunt in passing, but honestly, I preferred it that way. Silence was better than the passive-aggressive remarks I'd endured for 3 years. My mom was more complicated. She tried to pretend everything was back to normal, making my favorite meals, asking how my classes were going, but her eyes betrayed the truth. She was carrying a lot of guilt. And though I was still hurt, I saw that she was trying. One night, we sat down together at the dining table, something we hadn't done in months. She pushed a bowl of pasta toward me and stared at her plate. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have protected you. I let him come between us." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "You didn't see it?" "I didn't want to," she whispered. I was so happy to have someone love me again. I ignored the signs. I kept hoping things would settle down. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I just felt sadness. He didn't want me here. He made that very clear. She nodded slowly. "I know that now. And I promise, I'm going to make it right." We sat in silence after that. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. A few days later, we had our first family therapy session. Eric sat stiffly in the chair, arms folded, his jaw tight with resentment. The therapist, a calm, middle-aged man named Mr. Cole, didn't force anything. He simply invited us to talk. At first, it was like pulling teeth. Eric kept deflecting. My mom spoke in vague apologies. I said very little, but as the weeks went by, things began to shift. Slowly, Eric started to acknowledge, if not accept, that I wasn't a guest in this house, I was its owner. And with that came a begrudging level of respect, or at the very least, restraint. He wasn't suddenly kind, but he wasn't cruel anymore either. Eventually, he agreed to apologize, not because he wanted to, but because my mom told him it was the only way to stay in the house. It was stiff, hollow, but it was something. Outside of therapy, I started taking control of my life again. I arranged for a financial advisor to help me understand the responsibilities of homeownership. Aunt Marilyn helped me find someone trustworthy. We worked through paperwork, tax documents, insurance, and all the legal stuff my grandma had quietly prepared for me. In school, I stayed enrolled. I picked up a few more shifts at work, just enough to cover the basics while keeping my schedule manageable. It was exhausting, but it was mine. For once, I was working towards something that felt like a future I had a say in. One afternoon, I sat in the backyard alone, sipping a soda and listening to the wind rattle the fence. My phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Marilyn. "Just thinking about you. Your grandma would be proud. Love you." I smiled, replied, and pocketed the phone. Then I looked at the house, my house. It wasn't perfect. The people in it were flawed. The walls had heard more shouting than laughter these past few years. But it was still home. And now it was safe. I was 19 and terrified. But I was also free. Not just legally, but emotionally. I had drawn a line, stood my ground, and protected what mattered. It turns out, sometimes the person who saves you is you. And with that knowledge, I knew I could face whatever came next.